Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, David here, and welcome back to another Atlus news video. Today I want, of course, to talk about Persona 5 Royal Sales, the re-release of the game on all modern platforms. Obviously, we just received, after a week of release, the first week of sales in Japan for physical releases only. Those numbers they always come from Famitsu a week after the release of a game in Japan. And it gives us a good idea of how well the game did, especially for Atlus releases, because Atlus games, they're JRPGs, and JRPGs, they do well in Japan specifically. 51k physical copies sold in Japan. We'll do some comparisons to other releases as well to try and get an idea of how well the game did. I know they did some comparisons themselves, with Reggie being the person who wrote the article at Persona Central. I like some of the comparisons, I don't like some of the others, so we'll just take a quick look at them and we'll do our own as well. So if we split the sales in terms of the numbers that we got, we have 51,000 copies total sold, and that does not include digital sales, as I mentioned earlier. The game sold 46,000 copies on Switch, and the rest is PlayStation 5, so that gives us about 5,000 copies on PS5. In terms of Xbox, they have a comparison for Game Pass, and I think that's good. That's awesome, because that is a fair comparison. Obviously, people are not going to buy it as much on Game Pass, at least on console, because they have the service, which is super cheap, right? So I think there's like 15 million Game Pass subscribers out there. So a niche game like P5R would do well on some type of subscription service like Game Pass. I noticed earlier last week what Persona Central brought up, and it's the fact that it became the second most played game on Game Pass at some point. And I'm gonna be honest, y'all, I think this might be the highest that a JRPG has ever ranked on Xbox Game Pass in terms of consoles. Very, very interesting stuff. I remember Dragon Quest XI not ranking as high. Same thing for Octopath Traveler. So this is very, very solid. We don't have sales numbers, concrete sales numbers, but at the same time, even if we did, I don't think those would be very high, to be honest, because again of Game Pass. I honestly feel like Atlus, looking at those play times that we don't have for Game Pass versus what we can see with it ranking second, I'm thinking they're probably really happy with this deal that they made with Microsoft here. So that is very, very solid for Xbox, with P5R ranking at number 2. Very, very, very good. Now, the Steam thing, the PC thing, is where it gets most interesting. Now, I'm going to go back to PlayStation and Switch later on in the video, don't worry about it. But in terms of Switch, that's where I think it's really interesting, because the game peaked at 35,000 players at some point, and Persona 4 Golden, you gotta remember when it came out initially in June of 2020 on Steam, it peaked at 29,000 people playing at the same time. And that, my friends, broke a record in 2020 for one of the most played JRPGs of all time on Steam. Most number of players playing the game at the same time. Fantastic numbers on Steam. So now that we looked at the comparisons that Persona Central did and the numbers that they put out for the game, I need to talk more. I have more to say, specifically in terms of the console versions, PlayStation, Switch, and also PC. I'll keep going with PC. As I mentioned, the record-breaking thing on Steam with Persona 4 Golden is super, super, super duper interesting. And I had this in mind through the whole time that I read this article earlier today. I was thinking, it's interesting because Persona 4 Golden on Steam sold 1 million, right? It did. The main thing I think we need to keep in mind is the price tag, right? The game launched at, don't quote me on that one, but I think it was 20 USD or 25 USD. It was super cheap. Persona 5 Royal, full $60 game, and it still beat it, which is really, really awesome, because the main doubt that I had for PC sales, now I always thought that it was going to sell well on PC, but at first I was like, yeah, Switch is going to sell the best, probably. I'm not so sure anymore, to be honest, because PC gamers, they're all in with this one, and I think Persona is a game that is interesting with mods too, so that probably helped it quite a bit. You can get the best performance on PC as well, so I think it's doing super well on PC, which is really, really awesome to see. Once again, once I conclude this video, I have something to say. We're going to talk about the future of Persona and where Persona is going to release in the future, and PC PC gamers, you guys should appreciate what I have in mind, or at least what I have to say. I know we're gonna get some comments saying, hey you guys, 46,000 on Switch, 5,000 on PlayStation. Obviously, PlayStation wasn't the right choice, blah, blah, blah. Well, first of all, I'm sorry, I had to discredit those comments right away because Atlus didn't give you a reason to buy the PS5 version, to be completely honest. Like, if you own a decent PC, or you own a Switch, or I feel like it's the least appealing version, even looking at Xbox, because on Xbox you have Game Pass, on PC you can get top performance plus mods, on Switch you have portability, and then PS5, well, you have the same game that you had previously that you can still buy for $15 with the original Royal release. Of course, you don't have the DLC and 60 frames, but it's still a solid version of the game, and that's where a lot of PS users already played the game. So looking at those numbers, I'm not surprised, and I'm not worried at all for Persona on PlayStation in the future either. Okay, the game sold over 200,000 copies in 2019 when it initially launched in its first week of physical sales in Japan. Persona's huge on PlayStation, and those numbers don't mean much. The Switch numbers are interesting. 46,000 copies, Switch being the best-selling platform pretty much every single week in Japan. And it's been that way pretty much since launch. It is insane how big the market is for Switch. 46,000 copies. That is, to be honest, a little lower than I was expecting. And I think the main reason for that is probably because it's, well, first, it's a full $60 port. It's a 3-year-old game as well. I'm not saying that 46,000 copies is bad. I'm following some sales analysts on Twitter, and they were right on it. That's what they were thinking. And I was there, and I was like, I'm thinking a little bit more, or at least I'm hoping for a little bit more. And I'm gonna be looking forward to the Western numbers as well, because I think Persona is a game that has Western appeal more than some other RPGs, like let's say the Neon Falcon games. Those games, I feel like they have more appeal in the East than in the West, right? I'm just speculating here, but I think those numbers are interesting. I do want to pull up other games, other recent releases for Atlus, just to at least compare the Switch numbers, and then I'll conclude what I think with the other platforms, okay? The first game that I want us to look at is SMT3 Nocturne HD Remastered, which came out in 2020. That game sold 52,000 copies on Switch in its first week. That is a brand new game for a ton of people out there, because this was the first re-release of a almost 20-year-old game at that point. So sold a little bit more than P5R. That was a $10 less price as well. It was $50 instead of $60, but it's still interesting. I'm sure some of y'all listening are like, ooh, Nocturne sold more. Yes, it did. And I honestly think this is really interesting to look at. And we can even push the research a little bit more. Let's look at 13 Sentinels Nintendo Switch numbers now. 13 Sentinels Aegis-Rim, it came out full price 2 years after the original release on Nintendo Switch at full price $60. The game sold 27,000 copies, which is less than half of what P5R did. And this is Persona against a new IP by Vanillaware, which is a futuristic time-traveling visual novel with RTS combat. It's interesting. I'm confused. I'm a little bit confused, as you guys might have noticed, with this Persona 5 Royal first week of sales in Japan. It's interesting. I'm not bummed out. I'm just confused. I want to hear what you guys think on this one. In terms of Persona in the future, I think it's interesting. I really do. What I'm thinking, if Atlus, when they started working on Persona 6 around 2019, I'm thinking they probably went for PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, right? Pretty clear. With everything going on with PC, with how well their game are doing on PC, with the increasing popularity of the PC platform, not necessarily in Japan, but for the rest of the world, I'm thinking they want to put the game on PC as well. Now, we don't know what are Nintendo's plans for the future as well, but I'm thinking it's successful enough. The Switch is successful enough for Atlus to want Persona 6 or any other type of Persona release on Switch. That's what I'm thinking. But at the same time, we don't know their plans. So whenever Persona 6 is ready, we don't even know if Atlus, if they have development kits for the next Switch thing, whether it's a Pro system or the next generation of Nintendo hardware. So we don't even know if the game's gonna be, if the system will be able to handle it, right? Depending on what Atlus is aiming for. So it is going to be interesting to keep an eye at Atlus for future releases, not just Persona, everything. Re Fantasy is going to be interesting whenever that comes up because that has been in development for so long. So we don't really know what they're doing with this one. Is it taking so long because they added platforms to the mix? Maybe. We have no clue. I want to hear what you guys think on this one. Persona 5 Royal selling around 50,000 copies in its first week of sales in Japan. What are you looking forward to in terms of Atlus releases for 2022? For 2023, we're already at the end of 2022. It's been a big year for Atlus releases. I still have content coming, you guys. Thank you so much for watching the video. I really do appreciate it. The support on the review was great too. Thank you all so much. A quick thumbs up, as always, is a big help. If you want to stay up to date on anything in terms of Atlus SMT Persona news, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We will see you all in the next one. You have a great weekend, y'all. Bye.